Hi, this is Jack Westman for ESCAnews.com here in Cologne, Germany for the ESL 1 CSGO Championships. Joining me is a man who needs no introduction. A few 100,000 people know who he is. It's Anders Bloom from RoomOnFire. Anders, good to talk to you. This is your second CSGO major. You weren't able to make Katowice, whenever that was, back in April or so.
Yeah.
Is it good to be back?
It is really good. This is already turning out to be the biggest one yet by quite some margin, and we're not even at the semi-finals, so it is really good.
How are these major events different for you as a caster? Because you do all this stuff online. You do the smaller LAN events. These are the big ones, right? How do they differ, just on a day-to-day basis?
That's a really good question. I guess in a way, there is just like a different weight on everything. There's a different intensity. You know that everything matters more, and you can tell that the teams they have a different edge and a different sharpness when they play. And sometimes the result is really impressive, and sometimes actually it completely crumbles. Like I think it's like an all or nothing thing, and that's what we've seen as well so far in the tournament. So there's more on the line, and it makes it more exciting.
And on a personal level, as a caster, you mentioned before the interview you're losing your voice a little bit. Doing all these back-to-back games in the group stage, it must be tiring, right?
Well, it was fine for the first day. I had no issues at all. Second day was fine, all the way up until we ran into the Titan and Cloud9 game. Yeah. Sorry, Dignitas and Cloud9 as well was the really bad one, actually. Titan and Cloud9 was interesting, and it ended up being a really close call, and Cloud9 only just pulled it through. And then Dignitas and Cloud9 on Mirage was, I think that was the one where I maybe overextended myself a little bit.
Yeah, the final 2 rounds or so.
Yeah, he just that was too much basically. Yeah. But it was worth it. I'd do it again, and and that was, I mean, it was so much fun. Those first 2 days were a lot of fun. A lot of help. I mean, it was 12-hour days.
Yeah.
And now we're obviously the third day, and we're at the semi-finals or quarterfinals, and it's been good, but it is hard work in the end. It is.
So far you've worked 3 12-hour days. I know how that feels.
Yeah, that's roughly it. That's roughly it. But it doesn't actually. I mean, to be fair, it doesn't feel like that. It is really just a lot of fun. So you don't really think about it until the end. You look back at it, you think, okay, that's a lot of time.
Yeah. Are you getting the same kind of fan reaction because I know the players here are loving it, right? Compared to smaller events like ESCA in the States where there are very few viewers, they're signing autographs, they're taking photos. Are you getting the same kind of feel from this event? Yeah,
I'm being met by people who turn up and autographs or pictures and stuff like that, which is really a lot of fun because sometimes it gets a bit surreal when you're at home and streaming on Twitch. You see a number in the corner that says how many people are watching. So it's kind of a nice way of bringing back, a level or two, just realizing that there are actual people out there sometimes. So that's fun.
You mentioned viewership numbers. Just before we talk a little bit more about the specifics of this event, viewership for CSGO is going through the roof. Yeah. Exciting times, right? How do you feel about the increasing popularity of the game?
It's not surprising to me. I think if anyone wants to do the research and go back and look, I've always been like a super optimist when it comes to this game. Yeah. I still think it's a very likely scenario that we'll see an international for Counter-Strike eventually. I hope not 10 million. I think that's way too much. I hope they're going to keep the majors and just make the international a step above. It doesn't have to be called the international either. I don't really care about the name, but just make it so that going to these events, the majors, is still really important for every team. But then we have like a final deciding one that really highlights who is the best in that sense.
Sorry, go.
No, so that's that's on the one hand. Yeah. How far the growth is going to go, I think it can go very far.
Would it be? I mean, Dota has a fairly successful model. They just have the one huge event every year. Would that almost be better for Counter-Strike if we got rid of these small? We call them majors at the moment, but if we got rid of these small and just replace them with one big event, do you think?
No, I think actually that would be a horrible mistake. Right. I would hate if I had the choice. If I had to do one or the other, I'd rather we keep the major format that we have now. But I want to do both. Yeah. So I want to keep the majors and do one big event. I think it's possible as well. But if I had to choose, I would choose the majors, because the problem with the international is actually. I watch a lot of Dota, and I watch the international, and I've been playing Dota since Warcraft 3, like very early on in Warcraft 3 even. because I've just always been a fan of playing custom maps in Warcraft. But I only watch the international now. I find it even difficult to keep up with the normal tournaments. And I even, you see, whoever it is, Fnatic winning one game or EG winning, a different tournament. But you have to sit down and try and compare which teams were actually at what tournament to figure out how it all combines into who is then going to be the favorite going into the next international. So it's much easier to just watch the international, which is a real shame because obviously from a Dota 2 point of view, you'd want people to watch all the tournaments, right?
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense, I guess. Well, let's talk a little bit about ESL 1 specifically. One of the big topics at this tournament in particular is the maps.
Yeah.
The smile already. So players are saying they don't necessarily like Cobble all that much. Overpass is very complex with the different levels. Valve and a couple of the other players have been saying it's nice to break away from the norm a little bit and see, because tournaments in the past we get the same maps all the time. Is it worth introducing these maps like Cobble and Overpass that aren't quite ready for competition just to break away from the norm?
Well, I think a corollary to that question is, can you introduce any maps without doing anything like this? And maybe the answer is yes if you pick the right maps, because there are some maps out there that traditionally that people used to play in previous versions of Counter-Strike, Tuscan being one which is never going to be released, but if it ever was, would probably be one of the favorite picks. Remake of Train is probably a good idea, so if that turns out to be a success, then perfect. And then, we do have Season as well, which is actually also being remade at the moment. So, we do actually have a 7-map pool that doesn't necessarily include Overpass or Cobblestone, but when it comes down to it, I actually think maybe Overpass has a real chance now, because people have been forced to play it, and some of the games we've seen have actually been kind of fun on it. It has some interesting potential because there are no skyboxes, so you can. But it is a very, very elaborate map, and obviously still going to need tweaking. But I think out of the two, Overpass is also my favorite.
How about the element of randomness in that case? If they got rid of Cobble and Overpass and put in Tuscan and Season, for example, how do you feel about the fact that the final map in this veto system is decided randomly?
I'm kind of okay with that. I think that can be alright, because it sort of forces the teams into a position where they kind of need to learn more maps, and not just have, as it was in the past, where you can have one map but you should never play. So I think it's all right that you say, all right, if you want a real chance of winning and not just gamble on the 33%, you're gonna have to go for learning all the maps. But I think the idea of having the team that picks first also be the team that chooses a side, I think is a very bad idea. Right. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, well, a lot of people would agree, I think. Okay, which team has impressed you the most so far in this tournament? You can be impartial if you like. And
so, I mean, I want to say Dignitas, but I was expecting them to do really, really well, and they've done a little bit better than I thought, actually, even. So, but that means, in terms of how much they've impressed me, it's actually just like a slight bit, because I did expect they were going to be really good. I was really impressed actually by Epsilon. They just lost their match and quite in a brutal way against Dignitas. But overall, I think they've shown some real promise. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of that. And I don't know. I mean, I have to say Cloud9 as well. Yep. In spite of all the strangeness in their play, they are an impressive team.
I'm sure the American viewers will be very pleased to hear that. As a fine Danish gentleman, you must have some bias towards the Danes overall, anyway, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's. I think it's actually because I end up playing and talking with a lot of different pro players, and obviously I know the NIP team really well. I think it's just always hard to see a team lose, but obviously everyone can't win. So I think I'm just a little bit soft when it comes to stuff like that. But yeah, I think that the Danes they get really sad when they lose. They don't take it well at all. So I guess in that sense I don't want to see them lose. But it's hard. You got to put that aside basically. Because if you try and let your personal interaction with the players get involved, it becomes really hard to look at the game. And at the end of the day, the team that wins is the team that deserves to win. There's no other way about it.
Okay, still good to be impartial in that case then. My So you mentioned that it's always sad to see teams lose. There are two teams from far afield here, Wolf from India and Vox from Australia. And people had been saying prior to this event, it's almost, I mean, it's nice to have them here and give the event a real international feel. But is it worth including them at the expense of, say, Mouse Sports or some of the other European teams who might make it more competitive? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends a lot on what it is you want to accomplish with a major tournament like this. I am actually very sad that Mouse Sports isn't here now that you bring it up. I think that would have been so much fun if they had been here, but they didn't manage to qualify. And it was a pretty tough qualifier. Navi almost didn't qualify. But the fact is that, you know, the title of the game is Global Offensive, and right now it's only halfway global, right? So we're sort of spanning between the US and Europe and the CIS countries, but would be much better if we could get, especially I think, to Asia, but also the Southeast Asian region as well, and Brazil, in my opinion, so South America as well. If we can get the game to these regions, then all of a sudden we have a lot more reach and a lot more, I think, a lot more to offer, basically. And these regions in the past have had exceptional Counter-Strike teams, so there's a history to be picked up on as well. I can't think of a single reason why it's not happening. Well, I know why it's not happening, but I can't understand why there's not more effort put into it.
Well, is there anything that we can do to help it grow there? Because, I mean, in South Asia, they have their own brand, they have Counter-Strike Online, and it's kind of a slightly different thing. In India, you know, building a high-spec PC in India, I've been to India quite a few times, and they're still very much on 1.6 kind of hardware.
It would be interesting if there was, you know, a graphics option that allowed for I think there's the post-processing command that can make it a lot cheaper on the PC, on the CPU to run. And there are a couple of other things like that but obviously you don't want people to have an insane advantage like in the olden days when people would use 16-bit smoke so you can see right through everything. You don't want that kind of low-quality game. But if there was a way to make it so that people with worse hardware could still run it in a way, that would be interesting. I'm not sure if that's possible. That's you're gonna have to talk to someone who's you know, a Valve developer to figure this out. For the Asian scene, I think the major issue is the fact that the game costs money. For a large part of the Chinese scene, for instance, people go to LAN centers to play, and those LAN centers don't really pay for games. They play free-to-play games: League of Legends, Dota, Counter-Strike Online, all Crossfire, all these things, all free. So I would even be in favor of making Counter-Strike free just in the Asian region. Keep everyone else paying for it. I don't care. But if they could do that, it would probably have a big impact.
It's quite interesting. That's pretty much what's happening with League of Legends and Dota, isn't it? League of Legends is a slightly less graphical intense game, and obviously both free to play, and they're both huge. But LoL is bigger.
There is actually an upside to having a game that is intense on graphics, which is that it is a little bit more attractive to certain type of sponsors.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of hard convincing people to invest into a brand new graphics card if they're running League of Legends, which is basically, you know, running from a browser more or less. You know, you know, you can keyboard and headset and mouse and stuff like that, but some of the more intense requirements, you know, it's easier with Counter-Strike. At least you can show people the actual difference. So that might be a tiny detail, but there is some sort of upside.
Yeah, well, it's definitely important. That was the main debate between 1.6 and Go, I guess, for a while, whether the new updated graphics were even necessary. Yeah, interesting. I'm aware you should probably be back on stage very soon.
Eventually.
I've only got 2 more questions. I'll keep them quick. CSGO is still developing very quickly. The developers are here on site. Valve are here. I'm aware you speak to them quite often. What do you think are the main things that still need to be changed in Global Offensive going forward?
I think I'm actually, this is going to be such a, I think the CSET 75 needs to change.
Yeah,
it's such a minor point because I think everyone knows. I think even the Valve devs knows. I just think they don't want to make any like rash decisions based off of like a wave of criticism.
Yeah.
So they want to, but I think everyone can see by now that gun has to have some sort of adjustment. Exactly what it is, I really don't want to get into because that's a really long conversation.
Yeah.
But something has to change with that. And then I do think we need a really stable map pool that is applied across every single Counter-Strike tournament. So everyone has to get together, because right now it's not really reasonable to have one tournament use one set of maps and ESCA uses a different set. CEVO maybe put some in, leave some out. We're doing our own tournament at RoomOnFire, and we're using Train still, for instance, and that was out of this tournament. So it becomes very confusing for players. Like, here's the thing: if we're going to do the random map thing at the end, then we need players to know they have to focus only on one set and not 2 or 3 different sets, because then you're essentially asking too much. So those are definitely 2 things I think are really important. Other game changes, I still think the wall banging needs some adjustments. There's some inconsistencies, but it's moving in the right direction, so it's good. I trust that Valve can actually figure this out.
Have you fed that back to Valve, those particular points?
Some of them, yeah. I have a lot of the points that have to do with the particularities of how you spectate the game, Go TV and stuff, which are really sort of intricate things. I have a ton of ideas. I think Counter-Strike is the game that benefits absolutely the most from proper spectating and proper production, far more than Dota or League of Legends do. So I hope those points get picked up as well. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, very last question.
Yeah.
It's a light-hearted one. What do you enjoy most about coming to these events and casting these tournaments? If anything, if it isn't just stress.
No, not just stress. No, I think it's meeting all the people. I mean, people you work with online and people you talk to on Skype and have a business type relationship. You get to actually see them, and then I think meeting the fans as well. People who show up to come to meet you and watch you on a daily basis. Yeah. I think those are the 2 things that make the biggest difference. And then the being near the players in the game. That's it. Those 3 points into one.
Well, I'm glad it's not all work and no play in that case. Yeah. Anders, thank you very much. Pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure.
And I will let you get back to the main stage. They're doing a lot of shouting, so that's probably your cue.
Yeah.
Right, so for everybody, esca.net and escanews.com, stay tuned to the websites for full coverage of ESL 1 here in Cologne, Germany.